The Princess of the Chalet School. Chapter 11. Up the Zillerthal. Joey! Joey Bettany! Back came the answer. Hello! What do you want? Where are you? Called Grizel. Up in the pine tree just behind you. Look out! I'm coming! There was a scramble and a clatter, and then Joey tumbled out of the pine almost on top of Grizel. What on earth were you doing up there? Demanded the game prefect. Madame wants you at once. What on earth does she want now? Grumbled Joey, who had just got comfortably settled with her book and resented having to leave her perch. I didn't ask her, replied Grizel. If you go, you'll soon find out. Suppose you go instead of me, suggested Joe. Is that intended for a joke? Demanded Grizel. If so, it's a rotten one. Joey grinned. I'd enjoy seeing her face if you did go and say you'd come instead of me, she said, as she turned towards the house. Wouldn't there be a fuss? She was out of the hearing by the time Grizel thought of a sufficiently squelching answer, so that the young lady let it go and went off to the lake where the other prefects were waiting for her before they rowed over to the Brockau on the other shore. Joey, meanwhile, trotted off to the study, where she found her sister sitting on the window ledge, looking out. She turned her head as the younger girl entered the room. There you are, she said. I've sent for you to see if you know what the girls would like to do on the 4th. Why, it's not for a fortnight, said Joe in amazement. You are in a hurry for your birthday to come this year. Where's the rush? It's the last birthday I shall have as head of the school, explained her sister. I wanted to be extra nice, that's all. Oh, I see. Joey squeezed herself into the narrow space left by her sister and considered the matter gravely. I don't think there's anything special they want to do. Sure? Yes, absolutely certain. Why, have you got an idea of your own then? Well, I rather thought of a day at Meerhofen in the Zillerthal. Joey's black eyes widened with excitement. Madge, what a gorgeous idea! I loved the Zillerthal when we were there last summer, and I should think most of the people would go crazy over it. It's nearly as nice as the Brassau, only it hasn't got the lake, of course. You really think the others would like it? They'd be idiots if they didn't. Do fix on to it straight away. Miss Bettany laughed. You are enthusiastic. Well, it seems to me about the best thing we can do. If it's fine, then we'll go there. If it's wet, I'll take you all down to the hall, and we'll do it thoroughly. I hope it's fine, said Joey sincerely. Are you going to tell the others now? No, I'm going to leave Juliet to do that, replied Madge. She will like it. And it's her last term, too, as head girl. I hate coming to the end of things, said Joey vigorously. Most of us do. Run along and tell Juliet I want to see her. Joey slid down from her precarious perch and ran out of the room to the lake, where Juliet was in a boat with the others, luckily not far from the shore. Juliet! Joey's golden voice rang out over the water, and Juliet turned her head with its masses of long hair. Yes, she called. Madame wants you. All right, I'm coming. The boat was turned, and Juliet sprang to land, while Joey, having delivered her message, sauntered off to her woods, where she presently encountered Elisaveta. With her was Simone, who, in the early days of the school, had had a craze for Joey. Simone had intended that Joey would only be her friend and no one else's. 2 years had made a difference, and the sentimental French child had learned to understand that Joey could be friendly with her and 2 or 3 other people as well. There had been a good many scenes before Simone had been persuaded to realize this, but at last she did, and they were far better friends than they had ever been before. Joey said that Simone had learnt the little common sense. At any rate, she no longer insisted that they two should be all in all to each other, much to Joey's relief. Elisaveta ran up to her friend. "Joey," she cried, "I've an idea. Couldn't we ask the visitors to play us at tennis?" Jo shook her head. "I don't quite see how we could. Of course, some of them come every year, and we know them. More or less, that is. But I'm sure my sister wouldn't agree to ask any of them to play a match with us like that. You can't do that sort of thing at school. We have the inner form matches, however, so I don't see what you are all grumbling at." "But it wasn't grumbling," protested Elisaveta. "It was only meant to be an idea." "Oh, well, it's no good anyway," replied Joey, slipping her arm through Simone's. "Come on, you two. I've got a gorgeous piece of news which I can't tell you." "But why then speak of it?" demanded Simone. "It is unkind, Jo." "No, it isn't. It's only sort of giving you an appetite for it when it comes." Simone shook her head over this, but there was no arguing with Jo, and they had to possess their souls in patience till the café, when Juliet rose with much dignity and announced the head's scheme for her birthday. It was greeted with shouts of joy, and from that minute the girls could talk of little else. The head had asked the girls to give her no birthday gifts this year. Her real reason was that she was leaving them at the end of term, and all the parents knew, and she preferred that they should omit the practice which had held good for the other 2 fete days. The girls, of course, knew nothing about it, and were not to know until after the trip to the Zillerthal. Miss Bettany did not want them upset any sooner, though she felt that it would not be fair to them to slip away without letting them know till it was all over, which had been her first plan. The school had appeared to fall in with her wishes, but in reality they had decided to get something for the school, and already Herr Marini had been commissioned to choose 2 pictures and have them sent up to Herr Braun of the Crown Prince Karl, so that they might be safely kept until the birthday morning. "We won't say anything to Joey," declared Juliet. "She would probably let it all out to Madame, and then she'd stop it. It won't really matter because Jo is sure to have her own present." So Jo knew nothing but the usual presentation of the flowers would take place, and she joined in the serenading party quite cheerfully on the morning of the 4th, having slipped into her sister's room and laid her own gift on the table at the bedside. They sang "Hark, Hark the Lark" to Schubert's lovely setting, and as they finished, Miss Bettany thrust out the ruffled head to look down on them as they stood beneath her window, and thank them. "We've got another one," called Juliet. The head pulled her dressing gown round her more closely, for it was cold, and settled herself to listen. It was a very simple little song that greeted her surprised ears, and was a verse. One only. Joey hadn't been able to manage any more on her name. "I sing the charms of Margaret, sweet and kind. No fairer maiden ever graced this day. The richest pearl she is that man could find. It is thy birth morning. Sweet, come away." Miss Bettany listened to this in startled silence. The air was as simple as the words, but with a certain freshness which covered 1 or 2 rather glaring mistakes in the composition. When it was over, she leaned out of the window. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. Juliet answered her. "Joey wrote the words and Margia the tune," she called. "Good gracious!" The head nearly fell out in her surprise. "Do you like it?" called the small sister of the composer. "Yes, very, very much indeed. It's the most charming thing I ever heard." Miss Bettany suddenly felt a big lump in her throat and was unable to go on. She drew back into the room to recover herself, and the girls, well pleased with themselves, went off to their duties. Jo was the only one who left them neglected, and she fled upstairs to wish her sister many happy returns. She found her sitting on the bed, scrubbing her eyes with her handkerchief. "Many happy returns! What on earth is the matter?" panted Joe, all in one breath. "I'm an idiot," replied Madge, with a little choke. "It was so unexpected that I felt all choky, that's all." "I see. Do you like my present?" asked Joe, turning to the conversation at once. "I haven't looked at it yet. Give it to me, Joey." Joey passed it over to her and then stood by while Madge peeled off the many outer wrappings and finally disclosed to view 6 teaspoons. "Awfully appropriate, isn't it?" said Joe complacently. "They aren't real silver, of course. I thought they'd do for every day." "You are awfully startling," said Madge faintly. "I never expected such a thing." "Well, they aren't silver at all," confessed Joey. "They only cost a very little. You see, I'm saving up for the wedding present." A tap on the door prevented her sister from replying to this, and the robin entered hugging a big bundle. Joe had helped her choose, and this turned out to be a pudding basin. "It will be useful, ma tante, I think," said the baby wistfully. "You like it?" "It's a splendid present," said the recipient as she gave the small person a hug and kiss. "They are both most useful, and thank you ever so much." Then she sent them away to see to their beds, and lay back on her pillows and laughed till her sides ached. After Frühstück, they all scattered to make their beds, and then prayers came, and with them the presentation of the flowers, a thing which was never omitted. Madge Bethany stood there on the little dais, half smiling, half serious, for this was the last time that the little ceremony would take place. She expected to spend her next birthday on the Sonnalp with Dr. Jem. Joey, who knew this too, felt choky. "I wish there need never be any changes," she thought to herself as she wriggled restlessly into her place. The flowers were taken up to the dais, and when they were all heaped round the head, there was a little stir, and then Robin and little Inga, the 2 youngest children in the school, came up to her, each carrying a big flat parcel. "It is for you from the school, madame," said Inga slyly. Miss Bethany flushed. "But, my dears, I thought you would quite put the idea out of your heads," she said. "It is very, very kind of you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the thought." She finished tearing the wrapping paper off, first one, and showed a charming copy of June in the Austrian Troll. The other was another view of the troll by the same artist. "2 of my favorite pictures," she said softly. "They're beautiful. Thank you all very much indeed." Then she dismissed them to get ready for the trip, while she carried her new possessions to the study, where she pulled herself together. Of what was to come she said nothing, of course, but all the girls said that although Madame was always sweet, she had never been so sweet as on that day. They went down to the Sparts by the funny little mountain train which crawled up the side of the mountain from the plain below to the great Turnthal. With her were the seniors. Miss Maynard and Miss Carthow had the middles, and Mademoiselle, Miss Durant, and Miss Wilson looked after the babies. Marie and Egan had come to help carry the baskets, and they were as excited as the rest. Never in all their lives had they been further than Sparts, and the thought of going to the train up the Zillerthal was in itself alone an adventure, and they should also go to Meyerhofen and see the pine woods, where the Ziller dashes along from its mountain home to join the inn, seemed to them to be too good to be true. They sat in awed silence at first, but gradually their tongues were loosened, and they chatted eagerly about the beauties of the journey. From Sparts to Zillerthal winds its way by the banks of the river into the heart of the great mountains, where the highest are covered with snow all the year round. Past beautiful woods the train wound by farmhouses, the walls of which were adorned with wonderful frescoes, and from which linty-locked children appeared to watch the train as it went past. They stopped at primitive little stations, Fugen and Reed and Zellamziller, where the railroad branches way off to the east, and so at last to Mayhoffern. It was nearly 12 o'clock by the time they got there, so the first thing to do was to get to the woods and have Mittigensen. They set off through the little village, where there is one Gosthof and 2 or 3 pensions, the inhabitants of which stared at them as they crocodiled, the verb is Joey's, along the woods which clothe the lower part of the Ziller Alps. Here they found not only pine trees, but birches and mountain ash. It was an easy matter to choose a place for their picnic. They soon found a little clearing where they sat down, the mistress on a fallen log, and the girls in their raincoats, which they had brought with them. Storms come up so quickly and suddenly in these long, narrow valleys that the head had insisted on their bringing something to protect them in case of need. She had never forgotten the awful thunderstorm which had broken during the afternoon on the occasion of their first birthday in the Troll. They had been up on the Mondenschen Spitz, and they had to take refuge in a herdsman's hut for the night, as the rain only cleared off late in that night. She had had no mind to essay the scramble down over tree roots and boulders in the dark. It had been an adventure, but, as she had said at the time, one of the kind was quite enough. It was a gorgeous feast, and there were rolls, buttered, and with hard-boiled eggs, beaten up with butter and cream, and shredded lettuce, in a way of which Marie alone knew the secret, slipped in. There was delicious little cakes contributed by Dr. Jim, who had brought them on the previous evening from Vienna, where he had been attending a congress of doctors, besides those which Herr Minch had brought in from his wife in Innsbruck. There were French chocolates and bonbons. There were piles of apricots and plums and green gages, and there were 2 huge melons. They all ate till they had had enough, and then the baskets, which were of folding variety, were filled with what was left, the few which were empty being folded up again and tucked into one of the full ones. And then they were taken to the post office, where the postmistress, a cousin of Frau Pfefferin, mother of Marie and Egan, volunteered to look after them, while they all scrambled about the lower slopes of the mountain. "What is the best train to get back?" inquired Miss Bethany. Frau Hellegert looked wise. "The train back to Seespitz leaves in 18, she said. "It will be well to be here at 10 minutes before that time, thus there will be no hurry. Marie and Egan will stay with me the night." They said they would, so Miss Bethany left them there and went back to her girls, who were awaiting her impatiently. They wanted to get off to the woods. Chapter 12. The 2 Strange Men. Having got rid of all the burdens, and also left Marie and Egan in safe hands, Miss Bethany now felt that she might enjoy herself without any cares for the next few hours. She was glad to think that the 2 Trollines were happy with their distant cousin. She knew that they were inclined to be overawed by the whole school, although they got on well enough when there were only 2 or 3 of the girls there. This was much better arrangement. The girls streamed away to the woods, determined to make the most of their holiday. Some of them joined the head and chatted eagerly in a mixture of tongues to her as they strolled along in the shade of the trees. Some of them raced on with two junior mistresses. The prefect attached themselves to Mademoiselle and Miss Maynard, who found plenty to talk about. The remainder, among whom were Joe and Elizaveta, strayed off by themselves. There was a little fear of their being lost, for they had decided to keep to the banks of the river and see where it led them. "It's a gorgeous day," said the princess as she wandered along with Joey, who was inclined to be silent. "Isn't this a magnificent place? I do believe I almost like it better than the Tarnsey." "Do you? I don't," said Joey, aroused from her thinking by this. "It's awfully jolly, of course, but the Tarnsey is simply lovely all the time. You should see it in the winter when the lake is frozen over. Now this is lovely, but it won't be nearly as pretty when the winter comes. Half its beauty is the river dashing along like that. When it's frozen, it will be quite different." "Yes, I suppose so," replied Elizaveta doubtfully. "And anyway, our school's at the Tarnsey, and that makes a huge difference." Joey looked at her doubtfully. She was half-minded to tell her what was coming to the school. Then she remembered that Madge had said that nothing was to be mentioned until after the birthday. So she said, instead, "Let's climb down to the water, shall we?" Elizaveta was quite agreeable, so they scrambled down the steep, rock-strewn bank to where the water rushed along with a great deal of noise, and leaping up the stones in its bed. The children were thirsty, so they stooped down and cupped some in their hands. It was deliciously cold, as well as it might be, for it came from the mountain snow, and it had a sweet taste which they had not tasted before. Of course they splashed themselves, but that was half the fun. When they had drunk as much as they wanted, they climbed back just in time to avoid being caught by Miss Maynard, who was walking along with Juliette Grisel and Rosalie and another of the seniors, a quiet girl who never had much to say but enjoyed herself in her own way. "Where have you two been?" asked Miss Maynard as they joined her. "Don't get lost, whatever you do. Where are the others?" "In front, I think," replied Joey. "Run on and tell them not to get too far in advance. We don't want to lose the last train, and if they get too far away, it may take some time to fetch them back," said the mistress. Joey and Elizaveta trotted off, and soon were shouting "Cooey" at the top of their voices. They managed to catch the girls in front, which was just as well, as they were well ahead. When the two messengers got up to them, they were near the tunnel cut out of the rock, where the banks deepened to little gorge and plank crosses the river at height of some 30 feet or more. Here the girls hung over the handrail, gazing at the water as it fought its way down the valleys of the lower Zilderhall. It is only a small river, but here it gives a good imitation of rapids, and the girls were fascinated by it. Presently the others came up to them, and when they had all their own fill of gazing, they moved on. The banks grew lower further up the valley. At length they came out to where it is possible to cross again by the stones in the bed. It is very shallow here, but it goes at a great rate. On the further side there is a farm, and here they crossed and went to buy milk, which they had to drink out of huge pan, taking it in turns to drink. "We can stay here for about a half an hour," said Miss Bethany, after consulting her watch. "Don't go too far away, girls, as we must be getting back soon. You must have café, and we do not want to spend the night here, nor have to walk back." They scattered after promising to return in time, and she settled herself with the seniors, who one and all elected to stay there. It was a hot afternoon, and they wanted to rest before going back. The juniors were quite happy to amuse themselves in the farmyard, and pestered the good-natured Frau with questions about all the animals and the work generally. Some of the middles took off their shoes and stockings and tried paddling in the water, but they soon gave it up. It was too stony to be pleasant. Joey and Frida sauntered off up the river, anxious to see as much of it as they could. Elisaveta and Simone crossed back to the other bank and wandered along in the other direction. They were presently joined by Margia, who had a great idea of finding gold in the water. Her only reason for this was that it looked like a kind of river that might have gold in it. Simone was delighted to help with the experiment, but Elisaveta soon tired of messing about in the water and went off by herself, leaving them to get joyously wet and untidy while she strolled away full of her own thoughts. She never noticed how far she was getting from everyone, and it was quite a shock to her when she heard footsteps, and, on looking up, she saw a tall man with dark hair approaching her with a smile, while no one she knew was in sight. The stranger seemed to be anxious to prevent her from feeling alarmed, for before she could open her mouth to call, he spoke, making a low bow. "Pardon, madame," he said. "It is our little princess, is it not?" Elisaveta stood upright, a little air of dignity about her. "Who are you?" she asked gravely. "Maurice Tourniquet, at your service, Highness," he replied. "How do you know who I am?" demanded the princess doubtfully. "All good Belsornians know the little lady of Belsornia," he said, giving her the title her grandfather's people had bestowed on her when she had been driven through the streets to be christened in the great cathedral of Firarto, the capital of Belsornia. She knew by this time he must be a Belsornian, so she smiled at him. "What does a Belsornian do in a strange country?" she asked. "He watches over the little lady, madame," he replied. Elisaveta stared. "Why?" she asked quickly. He bowed again. "I trust the gracious one will not be angry with her servant," he said humbly. "It is necessary, Highness. It is very necessary. There are dangers for all of the royal house in Europe in these times. It is necessary that you should be guarded, Highness. It is the wish of His Highness the Crown Prince." "He never told me," said the princess quickly. "Yet it is his wish, Highness," replied the man flexibly. "Yet I am obeying my orders, Highness. I may not leave you till you are safely with those who ought to regard you as a precious and a sacred charge, and not leave you to walk by yourself." "Oh, for that, I came on my own wish," said the princess indifferently. It was odd what a change had come over her. The jolly-natured child they all knew at the chalet had vanished, and in her place was the Princess Elisaveta of Belsornia, who had been in danger of losing all her childhood. The man bowed profoundly again. That may be true, your Highness, yet it is not safe." The princess raised her eyebrows. "I do not understand you," she said. "I am perfectly safe here. There is no one but the school here, and the farm people. I thank you, Signor, for your thought for me, but I am quite all right." "It may be so. At least, Highness, you will know me now, and may be assured that I will do all in my power to save you any annoyance or trouble." "That will be best done if you do not follow me," replied the princess. "I am safe with Miss Bethany, I assure you, and I need no watchfulness but hers." "The Signora Bethany knows that I am to come," said the man. "It is her own wishes that I should be here, Highness. She will tell you that herself. It is her request to His Highness that has helped bring me here so soon." Elisaveta bent her head. "If my father has sent you, I can do nothing but obey his wishes," she said. "I thank you, Signor. I will now return to the others, and we shall soon be going back to the Tarnsey." Again she made that curiously stately little bend of the head, and turning, walked away from him. He looked after her with a smile which was strangely triumphant. "The first step has been taken," he muttered to himself. "Who would have thought it would have been so easy? She even told me where she is without any question on my part. The prince should reward me well for this." Elisaveta walked sedately along till she reached the place where Margia and Simone had been carrying on their gold washing operation. They were there no longer, and that told her that she had been away longer than she had intended. At that thought she flung her royal dignity to the wind and took to her heels. She got up to the stepping stones, panting and breathless, and found that all the others had just gathered there. They were calling her, and Joey and Frida, who came racing along from the other direction. "You sinful children," said Miss Bethany, laughing. "You are late, the three of you." She had not seen which way Elisaveta had come, and took it for granted that she had been with the others. "Where did you go to?" demanded Margia of the princess as they walked rapidly back. "We couldn't see you anywhere." "I went along the stream a little ways," replied Elisaveta. She said nothing about her meeting with Maurice Ternicki, because it never entered her head to do so. Margia was not a special friend of hers, and she could see no reason of why she would mention anything so private as the sudden appearance of a bodyguard for her, especially as she said that Miss Bethany had asked for one for her. Elisaveta thought that she might perhaps tell Joey about it, but no one else. She felt a great liking for the head sister, but Margia was not the type of child to appeal to her. Joey, however, was interested in Frida's plans for the summer holidays. She kept with her, and Elisaveta had no chance of telling her new friend anything as long as they were in the woods. When they were all sitting down at cafe and Kuchen, however, in the garden of the Gustus, Jo pulled the princess into a seat by her. "Where did you go this afternoon?" she asked in a friendly manner. "I never saw you till you came flying back along the path. I thought you were with Margia and Simone. You mustn't go off by yourself." "Why didn't you come with us, if you didn't want to stick with them?" "They were trying to find gold in the river," explained Elisaveta. "I thought it was a stupid game, so I left them and went on a little way." "Gold in the river?" Joey was wide-eyed. "What on earth made them think of that?" "Margia said it looked like a river to have gold in," replied the princess in rather a muddled fashion. "Joey, sit with me when we go back, will you? I want to tell you something." "Righto," agreed Jo cheerfully. "We'll try to get a corner to ourselves." But when they did get to the corner to themselves, and she had heard Elisaveta's story, she looked serious. "I say, have you told my sister?" Elisaveta shook her head. "No, if she asked for him to be sent, she will know all about it, and she might not like to be worried about it. People don't talk of such things, you know." Joey didn't know, but she thought Elisaveta probably did, so she said nothing more, and the conversation turned to school subjects till they reached the Sparts, and were getting into the little mountain train to go up to the sea spits. Then Elisaveta touched her arm. "Look, Joey, that man there. That is he." Joey looked. "Is it? He's got someone with him. See, Elisaveta? They evidently don't want you to notice them, 'cause they're hiding behind that luggage. How funny." Elisaveta wrinkled up her brow thoughtfully. "I know that other man," she said. "I can't think who he is, but I know him quite well, I'm sure." What Joey would have to say on the subject was lost, for at that moment Grizel, Juliet, and Robin joined them, and there was no further chance of private talk that night.